Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of DTE Energy, Gerry Anderson.
Well, good morning. So about a year ago, I got a call from Mayor Mike Duggan about an emerging economic development deal in Detroit. The city was in the early stages of discussion with Fiat Chrysler, and they needed to assemble a large parcel of land for the new plant. And as it turned out, we had 40 acres right in the middle of what they were attempting to assemble. Well, over the following 12 months, I had the opportunity to watch the mayor and his team work tirelessly to shape and reshape, and in some cases revive that deal, including going through the process of acquiring our 40 acres. And in the end, of course, the FCA deal was closed, and it's going to bring 6,500 much-needed new jobs to the city. And that's just the start, because the suppliers have just begun to collect around that assembly plant. 2 years ago, Mike Duggan came to meet with me and a group of Southeast Michigan CEOs to talk about another issue vital to Detroit's and our state's citizens: no-fault auto insurance reform. In the ensuing 2 years, Mike Duggan worked tirelessly to make the case that we needed to fundamentally reform our auto insurance regulations in Michigan. He was so compelling that many of us joined his cause. I was just out on the front porch. We had a signing of the bill, which was a wonderful achievement. I congratulate Governor Whitmer. I congratulate our legislative leaders. I think it's only fair to say that Mayor Duggan's advocacy was absolutely vital to putting that issue on the table in Lansing in the first place. The common thread in these stories: Mike Duggan continues to bring intense energy and intense focus to critical initiatives that will change the lives of his constituents in Detroit for the better. And when he grabs hold of one of those critical issues, he has the persistence and the tenacity to see them through, which is an absolutely vital quality for leaders who want to create real change for the better. So please join me in welcoming a man who has done so much to create real change for the better for all of us in Detroit, the Detroit Mayor and my good friend, Mike Duggan.
Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, no matter what happens the rest of the day, it's going to be a great day once I saw the governor sign that no-fault bill. It's terrific. How many of you have been here when I've done this before? All right. So some of you are new. I'm just going to talk about what we're looking to accomplish in the city over the last 5 years. And those of you who are in business, I think, will appreciate the approach, because the team that I have has taken the position that we're going to take the issues in the city of Detroit and tackle them in a really logical way. And so we know what we've been up against, that for more than 60 years, we lost population year after year. We had 1,000 people a month leaving this city at the time I was elected. And you remember what things were like. Half the street lights were out. A third of the buses were broken down in garages, and people just stood on the street corners in the winter. And the water mains were broken, and people were frozen in their cars all over the city with no plan to fix them. And 40,000 abandoned houses defined this city. That's what we were looking at. And we came in and said, we're not going to panic. We're not going to go in a whole bunch of directions at once. We're going to have a clear plan. We're going to go at this in 3 steps. 1, We got to fix the services. If the police and ambulances don't show up, if the lights aren't on, if the buses don't run, nobody's going to want to live here. Second, we got to change the physical appearance of the city. This blight-covered city, people are not going to want to live in. And we got to do beyond that. We got to take these overgrown parks and make them places of beauty. And then once we do that, we've got to take Detroit and line it up against our suburban communities and other cities in the Midwest and around the country to say, why would we say to people, choose Detroit, we're the best place to go? That seemed kind of far-fetched in 2014, but we went at it pretty steadily. And one thing that we never lost sight of is all of it gets a lot easier if you remove the financial burden of car insurance, because here's what I know. Car insurance costs $1,000 in Indiana and Illinois and Ohio and Wisconsin, our Midwest competitors. It costs $2,000 per car in the suburbs. It costs $4,000 a car in the city. It was a huge financial penalty for people wanting to be in the city. And I have to start today by just giving enormous credit to the governor, to Mike Shirkey, to Lee Chatfield. It was a remarkable display of bipartisan cooperation, and Dan Gilbert, who is in all of our thoughts right now, who pushed it along. But they stood on that porch an hour ago and signed this bill, and everybody in this room who lives in Michigan, a year from now when it kicks in, your car insurance is going to be dramatically reduced. So please congratulate them on that accomplishment. So let's talk about what we did. We had to deal with the services, and so we went to work. A lot of this stuff seemed boring, but we put crews out to fix water main breaks, which was really important if you lived in one of the neighborhoods. We got the buses on the road, added 2,000 trips a week. We turned on 65,000 streetlights in less than 3 years. And with my partners on Detroit City Council, and we have an outstanding city council in the city of Detroit, we went from years of deficits to 4 straight balanced budgets, and on June 30th, it'll be our 5th straight balanced budget in the city of Detroit. And the thing is that council, I'm not having a fight with council to balance the budget. They are just as committed as I am, because when you are delivering this and you're not worrying about laying people off or cutting their benefits, you can actually focus on how do you rebuild the city. And so that's what we've been doing. So we dealt with the services. We had to deal with the physical appearance of the city. If you drove into the city in 2014, you saw graffiti covering buildings, you saw piles of trash everywhere, you saw abandoned houses. The New York Times featured, this was the image nationally of the city of Detroit. If we didn't address the physical appearance, there's no point in trying to recruit folks. And so we came at this and said, we're going to deal with this blight issue, 40,000 houses. The city had historically been taking down about 1,000 houses a year. At that rate, it would have taken us about 40 years. But we assessed all of the contractor capacity. If we got every contractor to max out, they could still only do 3,000 or 4,000 a year. Even at that pace, it's going to be 10 to 12 years. Think about the conversation I had to have with the people of the city of Detroit. That if our best case scenario, if we went 4 times faster than any city in America in demolition, it's still going to be 10 or 12 years. And the only way to handle this is through honest conversation. And they weren't easy. But we started by saying, let's prove we can do demolition in a large scale. And we picked 5 neighborhoods in the city that were some of our strongest neighborhoods. And we worked some of the bugs out. We got in and we got moving. And then we said, okay, let's expand to the next area. We had federal funding that allowed us to do this, and the feds required us to go into defined zones. And so I said, let's do it objectively. Let's pull out our data and take every neighborhood in the city that's 90% or more occupied, and let's demolish there. And here was our theory. If you've got a block with 20 houses and 19 are good and 1 is burned out, if you knock down that 1 burned out house, you've raised the property values on the other 19 houses. If you go to a neighborhood that's got 4 occupied houses and 16 burned out houses, and you knock down 1 house, the impact is not the same. And this is a conversation I've had with folks in churches, 200 and 300 at a time. This is the reason for the boundaries, but I said, we'll get to you. And the next year, we expanded every neighborhood that was 80% or more occupied. And here was our theory. We believed if we went into the neighborhoods that were most occupied, the city owned 10,000 houses. Many of them were in very good shape. We felt like if we could knock down the burned out ones, we could sell the others. So we set up this website, buildingdetroit.org, and we started auctioning houses. And it worked. when people saw the burned house knocked down, the brick house that was boarded up next door, they started buying them. And we started selling them 2 a day and 3 a day as we rolled across the city. And so then we went to the neighborhoods that were 80% or more occupied and did the same thing, knocked down the vacant houses, auctioned those who were left. Then in 2016, went to every neighborhood that was 70% or more occupied. And you could see how we continued to expand, but we still weren't able to get to everybody. We've now used the $265 million in federal money that Senator Debbie Stabenow and so many people were helpful to. But as you can see, we still got a bunch of areas we haven't gotten to. And it's my obligation as mayor to get to every neighborhood. Because even if you're in one of those neighborhoods, only got 2 or 3 houses left, you're still on their block, you still want to live there. Which means we have to get to you, and now we have to figure out how do we do it without the federal money. We said, you know what? We're going to have a solution. So we've taken down 18,000 houses. You can see how they're clustered. Every green dot is an abandoned house. That's a great thing. But when I say we've got to do this, I said we took down the 18,000, 6,000 people bought vacant houses and moved back to the city. Every one of those blue dots was vacant 5 years ago and has got a family in it today. And again, you can see how they're clustered. The same areas we targeted the demolitions were the areas people moved back into, where the property values came back the fastest. And so this is a property value map. I spend a lot of time at this, but within 2 years, we've tracked this all the time. The white areas had almost no sales. The red areas had declines in home sale prices. But the dark green areas, in 2 years, the home sale prices grew more than 50%. And they tracked exactly to where we were doing the demolitions, where we were doing the auctions. It was a hard thing to say we're going to start at these neighborhoods first, but it proved the neighborhoods could come back. And so let me just show you what we've done 6,000 times. Here's a house on Monica on the west side. This is what it looked like when we came in. We owned this vacant house. And here's how it looks today. This house on Rosa Parks can't possibly be saved, right? Here's how it looks today. And this house on Collingwood on the east side, here's how it looks today. 6,000 times we've taken a vacant house on the left and moved a family in because of this strategy. So now, what does it look like? If you listen to some reports, you think there's only 3 neighborhoods in the city. There's downtown, there's midtown, and there's the neighborhoods, right? Okay? There are a lot of neighborhood associations and block club presidents that are getting pretty pissed at that description, because there's a whole lot of neighborhoods in this city that have come back very well in the last 5 years. People have worked hard, et cetera. So I said to my team, let's go to those early neighborhoods we did. And last week we just sent up a drone. I didn't know this, but my communication team owns a drone with a camera. So I sent them out. I said, go up and shoot pictures of the neighborhoods, because I want you to see this. So here's an area, Livernois, McNichols. Just went and shot it from the sky. Solid neighborhood, how it looks today. Here's what Southwest Detroit looks like. In fact, most of Southwest Detroit is in very solid condition. Here is Corktown area, which is getting busier by the week right now. Here's North Rosedale Park. You can't tell these neighborhoods from a lot of suburban neighborhoods. Here's the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood on the far east side. And so these are what we're doing. Here's the Campow Banglatown neighborhood near Hamtramck. There are a lot of neighborhoods that are coming back well, and they deserve to be celebrated. All right? And now we've got a responsibility to the rest of them. And so I showed you we knocked 18,000 houses down. These are 18,000 houses we still have to knock down. Okay? How'd you like to be in some of those neighborhoods? Right? So I have an obligation to every one of those families and every one of those neighborhoods. And so we're going to be coming forward with a plan in the next year. We got enough funding that's going to take us into the early part of 2020. But here's what we're going to do. And I will be taking City Council a plan that says there's no more federal money. We're going to have to deal with this on our own. And so my intention is to go to the voters of this city in March of 2020 and ask for a blight removal bond issue of $200 million. And you know how I showed you how our finances are doing well? We've paid down so much debt, we can actually sell this bond issue with no tax increase. Right? And The feds we take $15,000 a house and knock a house down. The feds will only let us pay to knock the house down. I went to them and said, hey, I got some houses that if you gave a builder $15,000, they could renovate it. Isn't that better? The feds said, no, you can't do that under our rules. You got to knock it down. I said, why would I want a vacant lot in a neighborhood? So we took all those good houses and set them aside. But under our own rules, we're going to be able to use that money to renovate those houses. We're going to need other sources of funds to do it. But what we are going to do is this. We're going to take down 4,000 houses a year. And in 5 years, by the end of 2024, we will not have a single abandoned house in any neighborhood in the city of Detroit. You will not be able to come and take this picture anymore. So, okay, you say that's great. But to say to the children of Detroit, hey, I'm going to give you a neighborhood that doesn't have abandoned houses, that to me is not a goal that we're aspiring to, right? I mean, that should be a given. But what about the parks? When I came in, the parks in the city were overgrown. I have an idea that we should be able to have every child in the city be able to either walk or bike to a beautiful park within 10 minutes. That would say to our children, we value you, you're important, we care enough to do this. So we started in on our park system. And we've got a plan, we've rebuilt 53 parks already, we got 60 more going, every one of those green dots, and every one of those pathways is being done right now. And so this is the Fitzgerald neighborhood over near Livernois and McNichols. We got a bunch of these vacant lots, right? I got this all over the city. With help from some of our friends in this room, it's been turned into a park with basketball court. That's now the center of this community. This is a little Hackett Park on the west side that probably none of you have heard of except the neighbors who live around it. And here's how it looks today. And Stewart Park, another little neighborhood park, only matters to the folks in the neighborhood. Here's how it looks today. This is what we've done 53 times already. Aren't these beautiful? And so this is the kind of city we're going to build. I'm not trying to just get rid of Blight. I'm trying to build something special here, and my partners on council have been great. You got to change something. This isn't always easy. Jane Park over here near Hamtramck was one of the great baseball complexes in America, hosted big national tournaments. And as you can see there, a lot of baseball fields in Detroit not being used, okay? People's interests have changed. Rather than cling to it, we said, let's keep a couple baseball fields. But this is a huge population area, and so we are now rebuilding it. And in Jane Park, we have 2 cricket pitches for the huge Bangladeshi community, and they are out playing cricket day and night. We've got soccer fields, we got splash pads, we got some baseball fields, we got tennis courts, basketball courts, putt-putt golf, all in one big complex. It has now become a center for that entire community. That's the way we're trying to reuse our park space. Near the Ambassador Bridge, we're building brand new Riverside Park along the waterfront, and it'll complete what the Conservancy has done so well along the water. And some of you might remember the old Rigel Golf Course that closed in 2013 has been abandoned since. And we are now rebuilding it today to a major wetland nature park for people to come and enjoy. We're going to build a first-class city of beauty. Here's the harder part. The parks I know how to do. But when people left this city, the businesses on the main corridors, they couldn't make any money. And they cleared out. And we have way too many corridors like this where you've got boarded up storefronts. Now, that's a tougher fight. Because you've got to get a business to come in and want to open in that storefront and believe they can make money. This is not something government can do by itself. So we said, all right, why don't we try a few areas? Let's go to some folks who invest, help them Invest Detroit and a lot of other people here. And let's pick 3 areas, Livernois, McNichols, the Island View Grand Villages area southwest, and let's see if we can't prove that the same kind of development you saw come to Midtown. Could it come to these neighborhoods? And so this is the corner of 7th and Livernois. Longtime Detroiters remember it as the B. Siegel's Fashion Shop. It's been closed for 15 years, and it now is being rebuilt with the help of the Strategic Neighborhood Fund, anchoring all those great neighborhoods. And then the city's going on top of it. So this is Livernois. There's the B. Siegel that's being rebuilt. You can see the construction. But Livernois itself has got a median that has been devastated in this commercial corridor. We're tearing out the median. All of this is being done with the input of the neighbors and the business folks. And here's what we're putting in. Right now, this is how Livernois is going to look by the end of this year. And that's bringing business investment in, and we've got restaurants and clothing shops opening up because we've got people moving into the houses. And over on the east side on Kirchhoff, everybody can't say the east side, right? Here's how this street looked 4 years ago. Here's the same block today. It's coming back. Businesses on Kirchhoff moving in. This was a closed NBD bank, and here's how it looks today with retail and housing on the upper levels. And this is also over on Agnes in the same West Village area. Here's how it looks today. And this is Kirchhoff, and here's what the city's doing to rebuild the streetscape. And it's working. First, we have to subsidize the businesses, but then the second business needs less subsidy, the next business needs less subsidy, and so we're doing the same thing in Southwest Detroit. So, all of these plans are being done with the neighbors. The days of the government or somebody from the outside coming into your neighborhood and doing your project and telling you what to do, that's over. We're not doing that. Many of you know I got elected mayor by sitting in 250 house parties in people's living rooms in every neighborhood in the city. People know what they want in their neighborhoods. There's collective wisdom in these neighborhoods. And so what we've had is hundreds of meetings where the neighbors talk about what they want to see. And the investors talk about what they want to see. And we got to the point where we said, okay, we got Livernois McNichols, Island View, Greater Village, Southwest, it's working. But I got the same question. I got to answer to people in the rest of the city, what about me? And I got to tell you, in the city of Detroit, everybody believes that somebody in this part of the city got something better than them. I mean, it's part of the culture. And so I said, I need 7 more. I got to go to 10 neighborhoods. How are we going to do this? Can we do it all the way at once? Every one of those neighborhoods, housing is coming back. They don't have any place to shop. And so we had enormous support from the philanthropic community. All of these foundations kicked in either in the first phase when it seemed like a real risk or now in the later phases to get us going. But we weren't going to be able to get there if we didn't get the corporate community to get in. And so I went and sat down with some of our leaders. Some of them are here today. But Gary Torgo from Chemical Bank and Steve Steiner from Huntington and Dan Lepp from Blue Cross and led a team of 7 others. And they said, we're going to put in $5 million each, $1 million a year for 5 years. And it's going to leverage another $100 million in commitment because here's what's going to happen. You've got an apartment building that sits in West Village. It's going to take $500,000 to renovate, but when you figure out what the rents are going to be, you can't afford to spend more than $400,000 to make it work. They put in $100,000. The building gets renovated, people move in. The next one needs a $50,000 subsidy. By 2 more later, they're making a profit, and you can go to another neighborhood. And so what these business owners were looking at was, I could put in $35 million and bring another $100 million in. And then my friend Dave Girardat, the president of Fifth Third Bank, who's a 4th-generation Detroiter, who was one of the first 7, he says, you know, I've been off the east side my whole time. How about if I, instead of a general fund, what if I take a neighborhood? What if I partner with 7 and Gratiot and my $5 million goes there, and we partner that way? And we started talking to all of these donors, and everybody said, you know what, that makes sense, because here's the pattern that we saw when a lot of these groups did this on Woodward, and we had Kresge and Hudson Weber and so many others who did this. When they started development on Woodward back in 2012, anytime a deal had to work, philanthropy had to put in this part designated in black. You had to subsidize it just to get it built. And by 2015, didn't take much, and by 2017, you didn't have to do anything, and now these deals are profitable. Nobody has to put charity in to develop on Woodward. Could our individual corporate partners replicate that process in each of the neighborhoods? And they said, let's give it a try. And so after Dave Girardat, Sandro Danello in Flagstar says, I'll take the old Redford neighborhood out by 6 Mile and Lasser. And this is the beauty of this. They aren't going in telling folks what to do. I went out for cleanup day at Flagstar, in Northwest Detroit. The folks in the red were Flagstar employees. The others were neighbors from the community. They were working side by side, neighborhood cleanup, learning to get to know each other, being respectful of each other. Flagstar's got a branch there, and here's the kind of stuff that they're going to stimulate. We have enormous potential in this little stretch on Lasser, and the plans are to build out the landscape and make this into this kind of an area. And this stretch of Grand River is going to be rebuilt to be done like that, with Flagstar's branch and the neighbors and the city, all as partners. Isn't this amazing? So then, Roger Penske, who heard about this and called me up, he got mad that I hadn't called him first, said, how come I don't get to do it? I said, fine, come on in. And Roger shows up in his typical style. And he says, I'll take the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood. And he and his partner, Bud Denker, who Bud in their spare time just won their 18th Indy 500 last weekend, Bud comes out and he starts sitting in the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood meeting, just sitting in the back listening. Nobody knows who he is. He wants to be a part of the neighborhood. And when he sees what the neighborhood's like, he says, this is something we want to do. And so together with that, they agree to help support this recreation center that's been long closed as the center of the community. And Jefferson Chalmers is down near the Detroit River. And to help build that east corridor of Jefferson to look like this. All right? Does anybody doubt Roger Penske is going to get it done? Okay? But you have to see this when you go to neighbors who feel like they've been forgotten for years and say, Roger Penske cares about my neighborhood and is here for me. Do you know how powerful that is? And then over by Banglatown, David Dowk and American Axle, they've got this neighborhood, and this is, you get good days in this job. But they go over to Davison School. This little 8-year-old boy stood up and gave a speech when they announced that American Axle was going to put $5 million into the neighborhood. And in that little stone there, the children at Davison painted that stone in each of the colors. This little boy told them what the white and the red and the green meant. And you had this situation where this boy gave this great speech and talking about how their school had been forgotten. And now American Axle was their partner. And there was not an adult in that room with a dry eye in the house. And David now has that rock sitting on his desk at American Axle. This is not, isn't this great? Well, this isn't charity. We're bonding with the neighborhoods. And so here's what's going to happen. This stretch of Conant, I believe, is going to end up to get rebuilt like this. In the front of that little boy's school, we plan to redevelop to look like that. Do you see why the kids are so excited? They feel like they've been forgotten for a long time, but because the city and philanthropy and the companies are coming together, we can do this. And so I would say to those of you who are in this room, we have more neighborhoods when the neighbors are coming back. And for $1 million a year, you can have an experience that will change your life more than it will change the neighbors' lives. And if you say, you know what, I could do $500,000 a year, we'll partner you up with somebody. But come talk to me or Tom LaWand or Arthur Jemerson or one of our teams, or Gary Torgo or Dan Lepp or the folks who are here. Ask them. David Dowk's here. Ask them about their experience. Dan Lepp's here. And ask them, is this worth it? Because if we do this in a respectful way, this city is going to come back in a way that nobody can imagine. And so I told you that we had 3 steps. Okay, we're going to improve the services, we're going to change the beauty, but we got a third thing, and that was we're in a competitive advantage. And you guys know me, I was at the Detroit Medical Center. All I cared about was growing market share. I got here and said, okay, having good services and a good physical appearance, that's the price of admission. Okay? That's not competitive advantage. What do we have as a competitive advantage that will allow us to go after Chicago and Pittsburgh and Indianapolis, compete for jobs, compete for companies? If you just step back and say, why objectively would I choose Detroit or the surrounding suburbs? What do we do? And so we sat down and said, let's talk about what our competitive advantages really are. And let's talk about why people are choosing Farmington or Royal Oak or Canton to live or have their business. Let's talk about why people are in Chicago or Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And we actually went through a process where we assessed, these are tough competitors, right? And we were coming from behind. We said, we can beat them. How are we going to do it? And so here's what we said. We think we have 5 advantages. 1, huge amount of vacant land and buildings. Now, probably most of you are not thinking of that as an advantage. My predecessor said, we have all this vacant land, we need to shrink the city. I came in and said, we have all this vacant land, this is cool. We can use that land to our advantage. The city of Detroit owns 92,000 parcels of land. No other city's got that. If we put that land to strategic use, we can recruit people in here in a way that others couldn't. Could we use land as an advantage? And so we really sat down and said, this vacant land can be an advantage to us. Second, millennials are moving to urban areas. I won't tell you that I understand it, but It's happening. This generation wants to be closely connected, doesn't necessarily want to drive, want to be around other creative, entrepreneurial people. This is happening not just in America, but around the world. Except it wasn't happening in Detroit. But Detroit has the same kind of density, the same kind of energy. We could compete for millennials if we delivered some services, right? That's something that, compared to a Royal Oak or a Troy, and now they're trying to build downtowns to be like us. Who would ever thought you'd see the day? But there's something about this whole experience. So that was a competitive advantage we thought we'd take advantage of. Second, or third, our unemployment rate is double the state and national average. That's a bad thing, right? But here's the thing I know. If you need to hire hundreds of workers, do you want to go where there's an available workforce willing to be trained and work hard? Or do you want to go where everybody else is already working? And so we said, let's not treat our unemployment rate as a negative. Let's treat it as a competitive advantage. Now, you're looking at me like I'm crazy, but and that's what Sergio Marchionne thought the first time I pitched it to him. But over time, the logic becomes clear. We are building an absolutely spectacular riverfront. And what Mark Wallace and the team are doing, and I don't have time to show you all the pictures today, but it is unbelievable. And now with what the Wilson Foundation is doing down on the west side, the beach that's going in on the east side, we are going to have one of the most spectacular riverfronts in America. And we've got a place that's a focal point for the first time in the city's history. People of all ages, of all ethnic groups, of all religions, of all incomes, they all come to one place. If you haven't been down on our riverfront on a weekend, we have a central gathering place. And it is a competitive advantage over a lot of the cities. Now, Chicago's got a beautiful one too, but a lot of others, there was something that we were looking at, and the auto industry is located here. In 2008 and 2009, that probably didn't seem like an advantage. But I got to tell you, the last 4 or 5 years, it's a huge advantage. And so were we going to concede the fact that while the auto industry started here, it could go expand in other places, or were we going to fight back? And so we look at this picture and say, can we take these 5 things and go after companies and bring them back? And we said, well, let's give it a try. And so easiest thing was the millennial recruiting, right? Once we started to clean up the services, we landed Microsoft. And then we landed Google. And then we landed LinkedIn. And these, the truth is that an awful lot of the talented software engineers and the like don't want to drive to a suburban office, park and drive home at night. And so we saw this advantage and we got them here. And then we went and got bank headquarters. Same thing, we wanted to get the top talent. And so Dave Girodot and Fifth Third came down first with 300 jobs. I said, wow, bank headquarters. Moved to Detroit. And then Ally Bank, which had been here, it had largely left, moved into their headquarters with 1,400 jobs in downtown. And of course, I had Dan Gilbert on my side, which helps the negotiation. But we convinced them that the future of their company was better off. And then the most remarkable, Chemical Bank, now one of the largest banks in the Midwest, they first moved headquarters from up in Midland, but now they're acquiring TCF, and they are going to take this major regional bank, and they're building a new 20-story headquarters in downtown Detroit. You say, this is progress. That's all good. We tell you the downside. And J.P. Morgan did an analysis for us. Most Detroiters are getting up in the morning going to work to jobs in the suburbs because the lower skill jobs are concentrated in the suburbs. Most people working in Detroit are driving in from the suburbs. The higher education, higher skill jobs are coming in. Literally every morning in Detroit, we have people crossing. We have to change that. We've got to get jobs. Now, certainly we've got to fix the school system over time, but right now, we got to get jobs that Detroiters can get trained for and make a good living. So we said, all right, this is really good. We like this. It's helping our income tax base. But we have to have a strategy for jobs for Detroiters. Because when I look at the world, here's what I think. 200,000 people moved out of the city in the 10 years before I got elected. The people of Detroit voted for me. The people who elected me were the people who stayed. Okay? That's who put me to work. And so I get up every morning saying, my responsibility are the ones that stayed. Can I get jobs into the city? And so Tom Lewand and our outstanding economic development team said, all right, let's give it a try. And so in March of 2019, this is what the charts, these are the charts we've been taking around for our competitive advantage. And every time I pitch a company, I say, you know what? Novi's a great city. Rochester Hills is a great city. How many folks you need to hire? Because there aren't that many. And to my friends in the auto industry, and we had not had a new parts plant built in Detroit in 20 years, I said, where are you going to hire? Chicago? You want to go to Chicago area? Huntsville, Alabama is where Toyota is building their new plant. Nashville is where Volkswagen built their new plant, and it should be 2.5%, not 25%. And Spartanburg, South Carolina is where BMW built their plant. You can go down and build in the South, and maybe you can get away from the unions if that's your strategy. Who's going to work your plant? But what we have in the city are hardworking people who just need a chance. And so that's what we went and started pitching. And at first, they would listen to us say, yeah, right, this guy's going to pitch me his unemployment rate, right? And so we got Wolverine Packing. They just built this new plant, 100 jobs in the city of Detroit, just north of Eastern Market. I said, that's good. And Cardinal Health, a logistics center that delivers medical supplies, 150 jobs in an area in Rosa Parks that was supplies Henry Ford and DMC. And then our breakthrough, Flexingate. Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Bill Ford just said to him one thing, asked him before he put this plan in to talk to me before he went anyplace else. And they make the parts for the Ford Broncos that are made out in the Wayne assembly plant. And so Shad Khan came in and said, I'm under enormous pressure from Ford. You got 30 days to put a deal together for me. I said, that's 10 days more than I need. And so we had this, but again, we had a bunch of abandoned land on the I-94 industrial complex, but sitting there for years. I was in a position to move at a pace others weren't. So we put this together, they did it, and they went to hire for their first 500 people, 16,000 people showed up. And they found the caliber of their applicants was excellent. They may not have a PhD, but they're smart, hardworking, dedicated folks. And now the word started to go through the auto industry. Hey, not only can you move fast to build in Detroit, but there are people who will work there. So now we started to sell the I-94 industrial park, and we got a logistics company after Flexingate, Link Logistics, and they came in and put in that at 150 jobs. And then ArcelorMittal put in frames, make frames for Volkswagen. Came in over there at 100 jobs, and in a couple weeks we're going to announce another parts plant that's going to relate to FCA that's going to, this is going to be another 100 jobs, because these folks are starting to talk to each other. They may not have been coming here for 20 years, but they're saying, this is working. I say, okay. So now we get a company that Sakti makes parts for General Motors. They take the old Southwestern High School, and they actually expand their plant 3 times, 600 workers, half of them are returning citizens. Now, think about this model. Sakti figures this out. You got a guy who's been convicted of stealing a car 12 years ago and hasn't been in trouble. If you do your traditional hiring process, he's a convicted felon, you don't look at him. Sakti says, no, we're going to look past that. We're going to interview him. We're not saying we're not going to do background checks. We are going to do background checks. And they adopted Ban the Box, which the state has adopted, the city has adopted, and it works like this. It says you do not put on your initial application whether they have a criminal record. You screen them and you interview them. And then you do a background check. And if you find out then that there's a criminal record and you want to not hire them, that's fine. But by then you see them as a person and you can take that in context. And so it is an amazing thing. Somebody who has not committed a crime in 5 years is less likely to commit a crime than the general population. Sakti figures this out, and you know what they found? When they hired returning citizens, they showed up for work on time. They stayed because why? They're going to have a harder time getting a new job. Many of them became their best employees, and now more and more companies, Henry Ford Hospital, and a number of others have gone to this process of hiring returning citizens. And so then Bill Ford, who sent Shad Khan to see me about Flexigate, says this Detroit thing sounds pretty good. And Bill Ford and Jim Hackett did a remarkable thing. 5,000 employees, $750 million development around 5 buildings. They're going to design the electric cars and the automated vehicles of the future right here in the city of Detroit. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this is... So we are reclaiming as a city the auto industry leadership. And then Waymo, the Google self-driving car. These guys are really interesting. Tesla has decided that because you know something about technology, you should build a car. Waymo says, we know something about technology, we're going to build technology. They build self-driving systems. They put them into Chrysler Pacificas, and they're in the business of the automated vehicle, and they are way out there on the curve. In Arizona right now, if you're in Phoenix, you can call Uber, you can call Lyft, or you can call Waymo. And the Waymo car comes and picks you up. There's a driver in it, but he doesn't touch the steering wheel or the brake, and he won't talk to you. They're getting you ready for the future. What they're doing, they needed the first place to start to assemble the self-driving systems. And we said, the future of the auto industry is going to be Detroit. And with the help of Dan Gilbert and my friend David Dowk, who happened to have some empty space and pitched this, we got Waymo now in the city of Detroit. We are reclaiming the future of the auto industry. And so we made a lot of progress. 25,000 more people working, but it's not nearly enough. And here became the ultimate challenge, the FCA assembly plan. And Sergio Marchionne, a year and a half, who was one of the great corporate leaders we ever had in this country, I said to him, your Grand Cherokee plant is running around the clock. You're going to have to do something, and I want to compete. And he said, we are going to do something, but you don't have any land. I said, okay, look, how do you like the products coming out of there? He says, we got the highest quality cars in the world, the hottest selling vehicles with these Grand Cherokees. We love the Detroit auto workers, but you don't have any land. I said, just let me compete. And he said, all right, doesn't hurt to let you compete. So he said, but I'd love to be here if you could do it. So we said, okay. We sat down to do it. And then the Detroit News last July wrote this big article that says, new large manufacturing plants are not in Detroit's future, and explained that when Mayor Young was mayor, he had the ability of condemnation, eminent domain, and we don't, and it wasn't possible to get an assembly plant in Detroit. The day that ran, Tom Lewan and I were in a room drawing this little map saying, we think we can get 200 acres and make it work. And so that's what we did. But here's the thing that was important. FCA could have gone anywhere in America and got 600 acres of farmland they could build on. We couldn't compete with that. We had to have one other thing. And I said, here's the advantage. Our advantage is the workforce. We have today 20,000 unemployed people in the city of Detroit actively looking for work. We got another 40,000 people who are adults who have given up. And many of them because they're returning citizens and think that with their criminal record they won't be hired. I said, so on top of the land we're going to get you, let us do one other thing. Let us do your hiring for you. And so we said, here's what we'll do. We have a group called Detroit at Work. We are doing these training programs and hiring for everybody. We're going to build one of America's largest employment agencies. We have 3 career centers now that are blue. If you guys come here, we will open them up to 8 because you got 5,000 people you're going to have to hire in a short period of time. And I only want one provision in the contract. I want a provision that says before you interview anybody outside the city, you interview the list of qualified people from Detroit at Work for Detroiters that we submit to you. And they said, you're really going to do this? And I said, we are. And so here's what we're going to do. We know what they have. And so we set up this website, and we said, it's going to be the middle of June before we're ready. But if you want an application and you live in Detroit, give us your text phone number. As of yesterday, more than 20,000 Detroiters have put in their text numbers wanting to go to work. And so here's what we're going to do with these centers. We're going to offer assessment prep. We're going to work on interview skills, application assistance. We're going to make sure they have their IDs and their high school degrees. We're going to train them ahead of time, prepare them for the tests, so that when we hand FCA this list of qualified Detroiters and they interview them, they're going to say, this is great. What company wouldn't want to be in a city where the city recruits and screens your workers? And this was ultimately the reason FCA made this deal. And so what we're saying right now is this. I've already got 20,000. They texted me as I came in here. It's now 21,400. They're not all going to go to work for FCA. And so I would say this to any of you who either are running a business in Detroit or thinking about expanding a business in Detroit. Detroit at Work will be your recruiting agency too. if you want to sign a partner, and we're looking for some more partners, because this is how we're going to have a competitive advantage. We're going to offer more service to companies coming here than any city in America. And so here's what we want. If you want to do this, your company has to either be in Detroit or be opening in Detroit. Full-time jobs with benefits. You have to be committed to banning the box. So not that you don't do the background check, but you don't screen the applicants out up front. It's a key part of our recruitment. And then we want the same kind of agreement with you that we have with FCA. That if we go to all this trouble to screen and recruit your employees, we want a commitment that you'll interview the folks from our list before you go elsewhere. And so what I would say to the folks here is this. If you're already in the city, there's opportunities to expand. If you're not in the city, think about this. How would you like to go to a place that's going to be blight-free, going to be beautiful, and is going to provide services to their companies, getting their residents employed like nobody else in America? I hope you're going to be a part of this. Thank you very much.